Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we are going to discuss how to become a product designer, and we have Dhwani who is working as a product designer at Happay, and it was recently acquired by CRED. Thanks a lot Dhwani for coming here. If you can give a quick introduction to our audience, it would be helpful.
Yes. Hi everyone. So my name is Dhwani Shah. I currently work as a product designer at Happay, which is a fintech company based in Bangalore. I'm originally from Ahmedabad, Gujarat, which is where I also did my bachelor's in design from GLS Institute of Design. After then, I've been living in Bangalore for about 3 years now, since I've been working at Happay for 3 years. I got introduced to design during my schooling days by my art faculties, and since then I've been hooked and I have transitioned from graphic design to digital design and now currently in UX design.
Interesting. I think the first question is, in general, what is product design? As you told, there are different designs too, like graphic design,
Yes.
etc. So what is the difference between, let's say, graphic design versus some people say I'm a UI designer, I'm a
Yeah.
visual designer, UX designer. Even some people say I'm a UI UX designer. So what
Yes.
is the
Yes.
difference between all the terms? Or do they mean the same? And product designer also does all of these, or how?
Yeah. So I'll start with graphic design because that's what I learned in my bachelor's, and then we move on from there. So graphic design basically focuses on branding, logo design, and print design. And graphic design is very much related to visual communication design. It falls under the realm of that. So if you're a graphic designer, your work would consist anything from branding for a company, designing marketing materials for that company, or designing logos for that company. After graphic design comes visual design. Now, visual design focuses more on aesthetics as well as usability, but your more focus would be on designing the visual language of a brand. So say you'll design something as illustrations or elements, or say you're given a set of gray wireframes, but put on the entire branding of the company on that wireframe. So that's a part of a visual designer. Then we move on to the UI designer. Now the job of a UI designer would be to decide where the elements will fit in, what interactions will come into place, what screen will come after what, and how, say, the button will interact if the user clicks on it. So basically, how the user interacts with that screen, or say what you see on that screen, or what's visible to you, that's the job of a UI designer. And now what the UX designer does is everything in the back end. He puts in all the thinking, all the brains, all the research, what the user wants, what the user doesn't want, what the user wants to achieve. That's the job of a UX designer. And when you do all of this together, then you're a product designer, because the job of a product designer starts from brainstorming, ideation, then you move on to research, then you move on to analysis, wireframing, designing, visual designing, illustration, everything. You may or may not do everything, but you need to have knowledge of everything. And that's when you can call yourself a product designer. But I can say that UX designer and product designer are used quite interchangeably nowadays. But then there are a lot of companies that want specific positions, or they want very niche personalizations in these job domains.
Got it. Interesting. So I think more on, let's say, the brand design, whatever, like the illustrations or designing for social media will be done by the graphic designer, and
Yes.
whatever we see on the screen is done by a visual designer, and the brainstorming and how things should work should be done by a UX designer. So
Yes.
let's say if somebody wants to get into a specialized thing, they can also get in as a fresher, or it's not possible. Somebody just want to become a UI designer or a visual
Yeah.
designer. Is that also possible?
Definitely. And I would say one should actually specialize in a profession rather than do everything at once. It's like being jack of all and then knowing nothing. So companies actually want somebody who specializes in something, because then you know everything. So then you become something that a company would want to go after, or say somebody a company would want to hire. So specialization in a domain is actually much better than, say, knowing everything but not knowing everything in detail. That's my opinion. But then, of course, you can become a product designer, know everything. But I think you become a product designer at a higher stage when you have touched bases with all of these domains, and say you have learned knowledge about these with experience.
Got it. I think more like they can specialize in one at start, and they can start learning other skills to become a like a full stack product designer.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, it's like a full stack developer. You become a front end or back end, and then you know everything.
Yeah, interesting. And the next thing is, what are the top 5 skills that anyone should know when it comes to product design?
So I think the first skill that I'll mention is not just limited to product design. It's limited to any design field. which is the ability to understand and empathize with your users. So the whole point of design is that you use art to solve a problem for the user, which is why we are not just artists, but we call ourselves designers. So I think the first skill that any designer, any product designer, or any designer for that matter should have is the ability to understand and empathize with your users because you design everything for the user. The next would be to be able to understand and analyze the data. So the job of any designer in the beginning would be to research and find out problems. So when you find out problems, gather data, you need to be able to dissect what's important from that and then use that so that you can move forward in your product design process. The third would be to communicate very well with your stakeholders. So when you start working in the industry, any design decision affects not only just the design of that product, it also affects the tech, the marketing of that product. So if you decide to say move a button from to left, then you need to consult with the tech teams and the product management teams and the business teams. Everybody is involved in that decision. So if you are able to present your rationale very well and if you can communicate very well, then that's a win-win for you as a designer because you get your job done and you convince others as well and you do what's best for the users. And say the fourth skill that I think is very important is the attention to detail. So as a designer, I personally believe that you should be extremely detail oriented. Say your button is 1 pixel short and the other one is 1 pixel longer. That may or may not be seen by your users. But as a designer, if you can be specific about the size of the button or say what the color of that button will do to the user, then I think you fulfill your job as a designer. Now, say I have a button and the primary color of that button is purple, but I made it red. Then the user may or may not click on that button. So it will change how the user perceives that button. And the last thing that I think is very important is observation. So often what happens is, say in the B2B domain, you don't get to interact a lot with your customers. So you learn a lot by observing them and you gather a lot of insights by just observing them. You can even observe products in the market and you get a lot of insights from that. So I think being observant as a designer, just going out, meeting people, traveling, connecting, networking, you learn so much as a designer that it will help in your day-to-day job as well.
The most important part, what you told, is the attention to detail.
Hmm.
It can break the game also. Like I've seen, like if a button is something related to like conversion in a e-commerce or a B2C context, then the wrong button or the if it's instead of placing a primary, someone placed a secondary button, higher
Yes.
chances that it did not get clear and the entire revenue was dropped. The
Yes, yes.
conversion rate was dropped.
Actually, so adding to this is something that Uber, Amazon also do it. So they'll always want us to say, I want to cancel it, but they'll always want us to go ahead with the. So cancel my ride would always be in red. And we would be alarmed that no, this is not what I'm supposed to click. And we would always say, no, I'll wait for the driver. So this is how they're using UX here.
Yeah, I think it's like a text. Cancel my is just a text versus I want to wait is a big button.
Yes, and but
Visually,
yes, but them using the color red makes us alarm that oh no, I'm not supposed to click that. So then we usually click somewhere else and then we realize oh no, what we did, and then we go back to click on it.
like dark patterns. They are also.
It is that, yes, it is.
I think the next question is, what are the top 5 tools used by product designers? Because as you told, as a product designer, they might start from brainstorming, research,
Yes.
designing, testing, observing, even communicating with stakeholders. So there's
Yes.
a lot of things involved in this process. So what are the different tools they use for this?
So I'll start with ideation. So you can use this tool called Whimsical and then you have Notion as well, where you can just jot down your ideas, make user flows, do user journeys. After that, you move on to mind mapping. So for that, Figma has FigJam and it also has a lot of templates where a lot of people can join in and it becomes their brainstorming board and they can just put in their ideas. Then, of course, we have a lot of tools for designing and prototyping, which is we have Figma, we have Sketch, we have Adobe suite of tools. So we have Adobe XD, and then we even have Adobe Illustrator, even though that's not something I would advise you to do when it comes to designing of screens. After that, when it comes to visual design, you can use Adobe Illustrator. You can use Adobe Photoshop as well. And then finally, once your screens are ready, you can prototype them on Figma as well because Figma is a fantastic prototyping tool for you. And after that, once the screens are ready, you can validate them on Google Analytics, where you can get data about your heat maps, how the user is interacting with it, how the product is doing, things like that.
Got it. I think there are variety of tools. I think the tools would change according to what the company uses in each stage.
Yes,
Like somebody would use.
definitely. Yeah, but there are so many tools. There are a lot of no-code tools as well, such as Framer, where you don't even need a developer. You can just it's so user-friendly that you can just by a few clicks, you can design your own website.
Yeah, I think I've seen couple of Framer animations also becoming popular
Hmm.
in recent days. And the next thing is if somebody wants to get into product design, how can they get started? Like how can they first validate is this an option for me? And after that, how can they start learning? What should they do? First, they should learn visual design or they should learn UX design. If they want to become a product designer, what should be the process?
So see, it depends. So when I had graduated, which was back in 2020, design had just picked up a lot of pace, even though design education has been in India since 1960s, which is when NID was established and the whole LOTA theory came into picture. So that's when design had picked up a lot of pace, and UX design was fairly new then. We knew about it, but it was not that evident in India. And I would say if you're in high school and you've been hearing about it a lot because design is talked about a lot these days, then I would suggest that you enroll into a design course because we have a lot of colleges in India and we have a lot of up and coming colleges in India. It's not just limited to NID, Shrishti, MIT anymore. We have a lot of small colleges coming up as well. And whatever falls into your budget, there's always an option to enroll into college. But say you're into industry or you're an engineering graduate, what I've seen is that in companies are super open to having people work with them even if they are not from the design background if you have enough knowledge about it. And for you to get knowledge about it, there are a lot of certification courses offered by IITs. IITs have actually recently started 6 month certification courses for UX design. Then if you want to do something international, then UC Austin, Texas also offers a course. As far as I remember, Maryland also offers a course. And then, of course, you have Pratt, SCAD, all of these other colleges based outside. And if you want to go for cheaper alternatives, then you have the Google UX course, then you have Coursera, you have Udemy, you have Growth School, you have Interaction Design Foundation. And if you just want to upgrade and just want to increase your knowledge, then you have a lot of articles from UX Collective, Nielsen Norman Group. You have a lot of articles on Medium as well. And I think LinkedIn also has a lot of interesting courses for UX designers. So I think it all depends on your budget, intent, and interest on what you want to do. But there's plenty of knowledge and material out there.
So they should choose based on what they want to explore first. Like some people maybe just beginner or they are just thinking of should they do it or not. They should
Hmm.
go up with a short Udemy course and validate if that's right for them,
Definitely,
and
they
then
can
they
do
can
that.
enroll in a
There are a
college.
lot of free courses available, so they can just try with that. I think that Google UX course is super. I have seen a lot of people opting for it. And I have lately been doing interaction design foundations courses, so they are very rich theoretically. So for someone who just wants to gain knowledge, then they can definitely start with that.
Yeah, I think IDF is best. I think recently I also was seeing a course of Don Norman, who
Yeah.
is known as father of UX. He had
Yes.
launched a course known as Design of 21st Century,
21st
on
century.
IDF.
Yeah, I have done that course. It's actually so one benefit about Interaction Design Foundation is that they have beginner, advanced, and intermediate courses. So based on your level of knowledge, you can start with those. And I personally feel like before you get into practicals of design or say learn skills of design, that's not very difficult. Just get as much knowledge as you can about design because that will help you implement the skills well.
Got it. But let's say somebody should learn visual design first, or let's say how after they have learned, should they start practicing design or should they learn more on the processes? So let's say as a product design process, there'll be a user research process first, there'll
Yes.
be wireframing, then there'll be
Yes.
visual design. So
Yeah.
which should they pick first when they start learning? Should they focus more on the understanding the user, the process, then come to visual design? Or if someone just want to do visual, they can just practice or improve their visual design skills with Figma or Adobe XD by practicing
Hmm.
something like that.
So I would say that you mentioned that user research, wireframing, all of these things are part of the design process. So when you undertake a course or say when you even are doing a case study all on your own, they explain the entire process to you, like how research takes place, how do you analyze the data, how do you draw personas, what journeys you have to follow, and then how you create wireframes, how you develop high fidelity wireframes out of that. So all of this is taught to you in a course. And that's very important because you need to know all parts of the process, after which you can decide what part of the process interests you and you move forward with it. But you can't just pick out one part and just learn that. And so visual design is separate from product design. If you're in, so for visual design specifically, if you're interested in it, you can definitely like just start on the side. You have Procreate, you have Illustrator, you have Photoshop. Just start illustrating, just start sketching, just design your visual languages. There are so many illustrators out there who don't have any background in design or you have no education in design, but are faring so well now in the industry. So when it comes to visual design and graphic design, just start with it. Don't think about it. But when it comes to the process, this process has to be learned like from the beginning because it will be common for all streams. Even in interior design or even in fashion design, a very similar process is followed. So that can be followed everywhere.
So basically, visual design is more a creative process. They need to practice, observe, learn from nature and other designers, and then do the. And but product design is more. They have to start from scratch, like understand the complete process of
Yes, because
designing a product.
product design, so as I mentioned, visual design focuses on usability, but it also focuses a lot on aesthetics. And visual design is, say, could be more of a self-expression as long as you're doing it for yourself. But say you start doing it for a company, then you maybe can draw in insights from graphic design, branding, and marketing design. Product design is more structured, is more logical, and say less intuitive. So that's why it has a process that you must follow, but there's no necessary. But I would say start with research before you move on to designing the wireframes.
Got it. So the next thing is, so once they have learned, so now people can start applying for jobs. So how can one build a product design portfolio, which is very important when people start applying for jobs? So what should be there in a product designer portfolio? How it should be structured?
So, so I have seen a lot of freshers product design portfolios as well. So there are always plenty of case studies. So you first start with identifying a problem, any problem that you can identify. Then you use that, say, Mintra wants to integrate an AI where you could say where that dress, you could see that dress on a model or you could see that dress on your body by giving some size specifications. Now that's your problem statement and you move on from that. So you found the problem statement. Now what audience is this for? It is for all the audience who will be using the Mintra. So you interview those users. You put in some of the insights from those users, basically the insights that help to carry this case study forward. You analyze that data. You create user journeys where how does the user arrive to this feature and what happens after he uses that feature. Then what are the user's pain points? What are his needs? What are his wants? And how can I provide that feature without causing a lot of trouble to the tech team and the product team? And it seamlessly integrates into the Mintra app. So this is all part of your research phase. Then you do market study. You see if there are products who are using this and how have they used it or what tech have they used to use this. And after that, you can move on to the ideation stage, the wireframing stage, and the final design stage. Once that's ready, you can test it with your users, see how they are reacting, and then you start the entire process again. You make changes based on the feedback, you again test it, and then you finally present it as your final solution. So in short, it will be problem statement, some of the keywords, what process you followed, then it will come to user research, the market research, then the the ideation phase, the wireframing phase, the final design phase, and then the future scope. What happens after this design is implemented? What changes did you take into consideration? What do you think could be included in future in this? How can it be expanded? Things like that.
Got it. I think you covered all the process. So it was like a structure where the user should follow when they want to build out a portfolio. And they
Yeah.
can have multiple case studies in their portfolio, like
Definitely.
multiple
And
problems.
I personally believe you don't need to follow all steps of the users because, say, what happens in the industry, often we say, if I have to build a product, I'll get 3 months. But that 3 months will be very less because I have to launch that product. I have to even hand it over to the tech team. The tech team has to develop it. I have to check whether it's working or not. And then finally, it goes to our testing stage where it's tested by the QA, the testing team, and then we launch it to few clients. We see how it's working. And then sometimes, so in 3 month phase, maybe I can give 2 to 3 days for my research and these things, but eventually I have to quickly deliver the product. And sometimes for feature updates, you'll get just a day. So you can't do the entire process all the time. So you have to, then you just wing it. You see this, I think this much research is sufficient for this and I can move forward with the data I have. And then you move forward with it. And if you are not able to do research with your customers, which may not always be possible, you can always talk to the people who directly talk to the customers, your sales team, your customers team, and get insights from them. And you then work on the features.
Got it. I think the very interesting thing is you told, right, talking to other teams. Because when I was in my previous company, I didn't have a lot of knowledge about that particular domain. And when I
Yeah.
talked to sales team or the operations team, I understood a lot about users, like and the problem statement.
Yes,
How does the
because
user
they
journey go?
deal directly with the users, and we are designing for the users, but we don't have direct contact with the users. So,
Correct.
yes.
Yeah. So gaining that domain knowledge, building that empathy becomes very important.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think that building empathy also comes with experience that I've realized now with the some amount of years I've worked in this industry.
yeah. Even I used to think when somebody says empathy, KR, I used to think, yeah, it's a very easy skill. But when you really solve a problem, that time you realize it's not so easy.
No.
Exactly empathize and build
Yeah, and what
products.
happens is often you have identified I've identified a use case and this problem needs to be solved, but there'll be so many constraints when you're working in a company or an industry that you realize maybe this decision back then was taken for this reason, and now that reason is no longer relevant, but I still need to solve it. And then there'll be so many constraints that you're like, how do I make the experience well for the user, be empathetic, but also ensure that every stakeholder is happy with whatever I'm doing?
Yeah. Well, like you need to ship the product with lot of constraints and
Yeah.
also meet user and business goals. Yeah. So the next common question is once they have built their portfolio, everything. So now they come to the interview process. So what are the common interview rounds for a product designer?
So interview rounds could differ from company to company. I have heard some MNCs, some product companies like Google, Microsoft actually have a lot of rounds spanning over a lot of months. And then if you go for new age startups, smaller startups, then they'll have slightly smaller rounds. So I'll just mention the basic rounds that generally interviews have. You initially start, so first of all, you send in across your resume and portfolio. And your first call would be the screening round where the HR might discuss some of the things that this role requires, the expectations. After that, you'll get the assignment round. Based on the assignment round, they filter out a lot of candidates that they think might fit in with their role or not. After the assignment round, your first call will be with the design lead or the design team member, where there'll be an assignment as well as the portfolio round discussion. So they'll discuss your portfolio as well as how well you performed in the assignment and what made you do that assignment. After that, there'll be the hiring managers round, which will be more of a cultural check. He'll see whether you'll fit into that team, he'll see whether you'll fit into the company, what you bring in. And final round would be the HR, where they'll finally discuss all the details regarding this role. And I think then you get in your offer letter. So in all of these things, the 2 to 3 things that these managers usually look out for is how curious you are to do this, to learn and to do this job, and what sort of enthusiasm you bring in. Say you may not know everything, but if you're enthusiastic about the role, they'll hire you because they want people who are eager to learn and not somebody who comes with a very set mindset and is not very flexible with what the company is offering. So curiosity and the willingness to adapt is super important when you're applying for roles as a fresher because that's what I experienced.
Yeah, correct. Because if a person is not curious, then they will not learn. They not
No.
learn, they will not be able to contribute.
Yes.
Uh,
So, and you can showcase your curiosity by asking a lot of questions. During your interview, also, if you have any doubts, just ask. Don't be scared what the manager thinks because they might just be impressed that you're asking so many questions. And don't think how dumb or the stupid those questions are. Just ask. Because once you start working in an industry, if you don't ask questions, you'll actually just be bossed around by all the product managers that do this, do that. And even the tech team would be like, we can't do this, do that. So you have to just stand your ground, ask questions, and not be scared about anyone.
yeah. So understand the why behind why we are building this product,
Yeah.
etc. Right?
Yes.
How was the idea generated?
Yes.
Perfect. I think the last thing is so as you work in Happy, so
Hmm.
it's a B2B product. So what are some
Yes.
key things that a product designer should keep in mind while designing B2B product?
So my first job was in a design agency, and I had done my internships also in design agencies. So my knowledge was super limited to me working for a very design oriented company. where the project would come in, I would deliver it, and often we wouldn't even take care of the development. It would just go be outsourced to another company. And then when I moved to Happy, Happy works as a startup as well as a corporate. And also Happy is a fintech company. So fintech, so the fintech domain is hard to learn, but there's a lot to learn in it. So that was my first learning from that. Second is the B2B market is very different from the B2C market because, first of all, in the B2B market, your interaction with the customers is very limited. In the B2C market, I have the advantage of going out, talking with my customers. In the B2B market, you may have access, say, to their sales team or their ops team or their customer team, but that's the most access I have. I may not even be able to talk to my real users. So a lot of it is you get it from your secondary research, you understand from that. And then of course you can talk to your team or their teams. Third is that the B2B design domain has a lot of constraints, which I mentioned a lot of times during this call. Because what happens is even a small change. So when we ship out a product, we train our clients to start using their products because B2B products are usually complicated and complex because they are made for such kind of people. They are not for users. So, and also they have to achieve a lot of actions. Now, say for example, one of the products that we have is Happy Expense Management product. Now, our product started with just filing expenses, reporting them, and getting reimbursements on it. But now we have a lot of other features in it, like asking for advance request or dividing that expense to different groups and also applying for travel reimbursement. So when we ship out such new features and our users are already used to the way it works, so even I identified an issue and even if I want to make a small change, I need to consult with all the teams before I make that small change because it will disturb my users experience. In B2C, it's not the same because in B2C, their users are generally the same. Like they're very like standardized target audience. And that one change will be used for all the other users as well. And the fourth thing is that this is specifically for fintech is that fintech is a very volatile market. One day, one product has opened up, other day that product will be shut down. So like it happened with Paytm. It actually happened with Happy as well, and it's governed by RBI. So it's such a volatile market that there'll be lots of ups and downs, and you may ship out products. One day it might work, one day it not. And I think this applies to any B2B product. It doesn't happen with B2C. B2C products suddenly don't shut down, but it happens a lot with B2B products. So you have to keep an open mind and be strong. Okay, your design may or may not go in the market, but you learn a lot in that process.
Got it. Yeah, I think especially B2B, the flows are very complex, and I've seen customers are very high value. You have
Yeah.
a limited number of customers who contribute to your revenue. And second is, as you told, regulations play a very key role. Like RBI putting a new rule can change the feature, how your future works, or
Yes.
even your integrations that happen with other partner
Yeah.
banks or other partner fintech. Yeah, interesting space to be in. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think you had
B2B
answered
is
all the questions.
Yeah, so sorry to interrupt, but B2B is a hard space to learn, but it's also a very interesting space because even though you're limited by constraints, you sort of navigate space in there and then you design for the user. So there's that delightful moment where you're like, I made it work in spite of so many constraints. So that's something very exciting about the B2B domain. And
Yeah.
initially, it might be boring to some people, but you get the hook of it and you realize there's a lot to learn in this domain, is what I understood in the time, in the three and a half years I've spent working in B2B domain.
I think one more thing is when you work a long time on a B2B domain, you build relationship with the customers. And I used to work in B2B before, and I used to get calls from a customer saying, "Yeah, the feature you shipped was useful. It
Yes.
worked well."
Yeah.
So that was really good feeling to have, like
Yeah.
you have built something.
Oh,
Yeah.
also one more thing, this point I missed because that B2B domain is also focuses more on efficiency and functionality. So the UI may not be very appealing or aesthetic because our purpose here is not to engage more customers, but it's rather to get the work done because we already know who we are targeting. We already know what's the job. So B2B is more focused on UX and less on the visual design. Whereas in
Yeah.
B2C, as you can see, we have some fantastic visually appealing products because they want the customers to get hooked to it in order for them to use it because that's where their revenue will come in. In B2B, the revenue is already sorted because we have already sold the product and now we want them to easily do their job by using our product.
It's more about like making their life easier, increasing their productivity. and also there'll be multiple people involved. So integration with their existing software that they have, so that data flows properly.
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. I think you answered all the questions in very detailed way. Thanks a lot, Dhwani, for doing the podcast and for your time. Thank you, everyone. Do you want to say anything to the audience before we close the podcast?
I would tell them that whatever I've shared here, take that with a pinch of salt because it's based on my experience. And I would say one thing that I learned a little late in my time in this industry was networking. It's very important to network and talk to people because you learn so much from talking to people. Be it that in your company or you go to design meetups, you attend exhibitions, you attend workshops, wherever you go, network, connect with people because there's a lot to learn. And also you might get a lot of opportunities, especially for somebody who's already in the industry but struggling to get a job or who has started out in the industry but is super confused about what to do next. Yes. And
Sure.
always be curious, ask questions. That's super important.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Yes. Thank you.